What drives us to step into the unknown, to walk the razor's edge between fascination and danger? Is it courage, curiosity, or the thrill of testing the limits of control? For centuries, humans have ventured into the wild, seeking to tame it, understand it, or simply survive it. But the wild doesn't follow our rules, and for some, this pursuit has come at a staggering cost. In the heart of a sprawling African savanna, a hunter stood at the edge of his greatest challenge. Armed with skill, confidence, and the belief that he controlled his fate, he stepped too far into a realm ruled by instinct. What followed would be a moment where the line between predator and prey blurred forever. Boris Eugene June, 8th, 1968. The afternoon sun beat down on the border between Mozambique and Kruger National Park, its unforgiving rays casting long shadows over the parched savanna. The air was thick with heat, broken only by the occasional rustle of dry grass as the wind carried whispers of the wilderness. Kruger, a haven for wildlife and the largest game reserve in Africa, stretched endlessly into the horizon, a place where nature ruled with unyielding authority. Boris Eugene stood by the open door of a jeep, his rifle slung over his shoulder. At 47, the Russian trophy hunter had spent years chasing game across continents, carving out a name for himself among those who considered the hunt a sport. With a group of fellow hunters, he had come to Africa for another prize, a lion, the king of beasts. For Boris, this was not just a hunt, it was a show of his skill and bravado. By mid-morning, the group had spotted their quarry, a pride of lions resting under a cluster of acacia trees. The hunters observed from a distance, their banter filling the quiet as they made plans. Boris, always eager to lead, was the first to volunteer to take the shot. Hours passed as they waited for the lions to move, the stillness of the day sharpening the tension. Eventually, the group decided to press forward. Stepping out of the jeep, Boris raised his rifle and aimed at a male lion standing slightly apart from the rest. The shot cracked through the air, sending the pride scattering. The male staggered, wounded but still mobile, and disappeared into the brush with the others. Adrenaline coursed through Boris as he signaled to the group to follow. They climbed back into their jeeps and gave chase, the dust from their tires trailing behind them. After several miles, they found the pride again. The wounded male lay on the ground, surrounded by 3 lionesses. The hunters stopped at a safe distance, but Boris was not one to stay behind. Against the cautious protests of his companions, he stepped out of the vehicle, his movements deliberate and confident. His boots crunched on the dry earth as he walked closer, his rifle at the ready. The lionesses did not move, their golden eyes fixed on him, unblinking. Boris stopped mere yards from the pride. His companions shouted for him to return, but he ignored them, his focus locked on the injured lion. Raising his rifle, he steadied his aim and fired. The male lion collapsed where it lay, its life extinguished in an instant. Boris allowed himself a triumphant grin. Then everything changed. With a ferocity that seemed almost supernatural, the 3 lionesses sprang to their feet. In seconds, they were upon him. Boris barely had time to raise his arms before the first one knocked him to the ground. The others followed, their claws raking his body as their teeth tore into flesh. His screams pierced the air, a sound that froze his companions in terror. They could only watch in horror as the lions mauled their friend, their ferocious power unleashed in a chaotic blur. The attack lasted less than a minute, but to those who witnessed it, it felt like an eternity. The other hunters finally opened fire, the deafening sounds of their rifles breaking the spell of fear. The lionesses fell, their bodies slumping onto the ground beside Boris. When the hunters reached him, the damage was catastrophic. Deep gashes covered his torso and legs, and his scalp was torn. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the dry earth. He was alive, but barely. Every movement elicited agonized screams, his shallow breaths punctuated by whimpers. The men worked quickly to load him into the jeep, knowing that time was not on their side. The drive to the nearest clinic felt endless. Boris faded in and out of consciousness, his life slipping away with each passing moment. As they neared their destination, one of the men noticed the silence in the back seat. Boris's chest no longer rose or fell. They stopped the vehicle, and after a moment of grim confirmation, the group realized there was nothing more they could do. At the clinic, the staff helped arrange for Boris's body to be sent back to his family in Vladivostok. Among his belongings, the hunters found an empty travel flask. The strong smell of alcohol lingered, a sobering clue to the bravado that had driven him to approach the pride so recklessly. The men returned to their homes, but the memory of that day haunted them. Their once close group drifted apart, their shared passion for hunting overshadowed by the loss of their friend. For Kruger National Park, the incident became a story of caution, a chilling reminder of what happens when humanity underestimates the primal forces of nature. Boris believed his rifle and bravado made him untouchable in the wild. He learned otherwise in the harshest way. But sometimes danger doesn't roar from the shadows of an African savanna. Sometimes it waits patiently in the places we think are safest. Thousands of miles from Kruger National Park, another man, bound not by bullets but by trust, would find himself facing the same untamed instincts, this time within the confines of a zoo. Nathaniel Moore, March the 16th, 1981. The morning sun bathed the Australian zoo in a warm, golden light, casting playful shadows across the enclosures. The air buzzed with the laughter and chatter of school children on a field trip, their excitement palpable as they roamed from exhibit to exhibit. The lion enclosure stood at the heart of the zoo, its plexiglass walls offering an unobstructed view of the majestic beasts inside. For Nathaniel Moore, a veteran zookeeper, this was just another day, a chance to share his passion for these animals with a new generation. Nathaniel had been part of the zoo's family for nearly 2 decades. Starting as a cleaner in 1962, he had worked his way up to become a respected zookeeper. His bond with the animals, particularly the lions, was unmatched. He had played a pivotal role in raising 2 lion cubs, Ayali and Morty, after their mother struggled during birth. Morty, the larger of the two and a striking male with a thick mane and piercing eyes, was Nathaniel's pride and joy. Over the years, the two had formed a bond so deep that it became a key attraction for visitors. That day, the zoo was hosting a large school group from Perth. As the students gathered near the lion enclosure, Nathaniel greeted them with his trademark enthusiasm. He held up a bucket, teasing the children to guess its contents. A few called out, "Meat," and he grinned, confirming their guess. Nathaniel had a way of making every interaction feel personal, turning simple lessons into unforgettable experiences. The children hung on his every word as he told them about Ayali and Morty, who lounged lazily in the enclosure, seemingly oblivious to the crowd. Without hesitation, Nathaniel opened the plexiglass door and stepped into the enclosure. A ripple of gasps ran through the students as they watched him approach the lions. He reassured them with a smile, explaining that the animals knew him and would never harm him. Ayali, the smaller female, was the first to react. She rose to her feet and padded over to Nathaniel, her massive paws making almost no sound. Standing on her hind legs, she placed her weight on his shoulders and licked his face affectionately. Nathaniel laughed, stroking her head before tossing her a piece of meat from the bucket. Morty, however, remained at the back of the enclosure, his amber eyes fixed on the scene. Nathaniel joked about the lion's grumpiness, tossing him a piece of meat as well. But unlike Ayali, Morty did not relax. He stood, his posture tense, and continued to watch Nathaniel with an intensity that went unnoticed by the zookeeper. Nathaniel, focused on Ayali, knelt beside her and began talking about her friendly nature in captivity. The children were mesmerized, hanging on every word. Then the screaming began. A student pointed, wide-eyed, as Morty lunged forward. Nathaniel turned just in time to see the lion charging at him. The impact knocked him flat on his stomach. Instinctively, he covered the nape of his neck with his hands, but Morty was relentless. The lion's teeth sank into Nathaniel's hands, shattering bones as he roared in pain. Morty's claws raked across his back, tearing through his uniform and skin with terrifying ease. The children scattered, some running in fear while others froze, unable to look away from the horror. Ayali, who had been lounging nearby, sprang into action. With a ferocious growl, she leaped at Morty, sinking her teeth into his shoulder. The 2 lions clashed violently, their roars echoing through the enclosure as Ayali forced Morty away from Nathaniel. The zookeeper lay motionless, blood pooling beneath him as the battle raged on. The zoo staff, alerted by the commotion, rushed to the scene. Armed with tranquilizers and tools, they entered the enclosure cautiously. Ayali held her ground, keeping Morty at bay long enough for the team to reach Nathaniel. They dragged him out, leaving a crimson trail in their wake. Nathaniel's breathing was shallow, his groans of pain showing the severity of his injuries. Despite his condition, he weakly attempted to reassure the students, his focus on their safety even as his body failed him. Paramedics arrived within minutes, applying a tourniquet to stem the bleeding. Nathaniel was rushed to the hospital where he underwent hours of surgery. His hands were badly damaged and deep lacerations covered his back and shoulders. Though he survived the attack, the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain with him for the rest of his life. Morty was sedated and later relocated to an African reserve. The zoo determined that the stress of captivity had likely contributed to the lion's unpredictable behavior. Ayali, on the other hand, remained at the zoo, her actions during the attack earning her a reputation as a protective and loyal companion. Nathaniel eventually returned to work, his connection to Ayali stronger than ever. But the bond he had shared with Morty was gone, replaced by a deep sadness for the lion he had raised. The children who witnessed the attack would never forget that day, nor the lesson it taught. No matter how strong the bond between man and beast, nature's power cannot be tamed. Nathaniel had spent years building trust with the lions he cared for, only to find that instincts can shatter even the strongest bonds. But what happens when there's no bond at all? Only the thrill of seeing wild animals up close, separated by nothing more than the thin walls of a safari jeep? For Linda Daniels, a moment of awe in the heart of Kenya would turn into a nightmare when the wild decided to reach out. Linda Daniels, August 30th, 2015. The Masai Mara Reserve stretched out before Linda Daniels like a dreamscape, the golden savanna rippling in the breeze under an expansive Kenyan sky. Linda and her husband James sat in the back of an open safari jeep, captivated by the wilderness around them. The pair had arrived in Kenya a few days prior, eager to escape the monotony of their lives as busy professionals in New York City. For Linda, a respected attorney with a passion for adventure, the trip was a chance to immerse herself in something primal and untouched. Their safari had started early that morning. 3 jeeps carried their group deeper into the reserve, the guides narrating as they passed grazing zebras, towering giraffes, and herds of elephants. By midday, the excitement had reached a fever pitch as the guides announced they were approaching a pride of lions. The jeep slowed to a crawl, their tires crunching softly over the dry grass. 10 lions lay scattered in the shade of an acacia tree, their golden coats blending seamlessly with the landscape. Lionesses lounged with their cubs, while a lone male rested nearby, his imposing frame radiating quiet power. The tourists, including Linda, were transfixed. The lions paid little attention to the vehicles, their familiarity with human presence bred from years of coexistence. Linda marveled at their beauty, leaning against the rail of the jeep for a closer look. She felt a sense of serenity as she watched the cubs play and the lionesses stretch lazily in the afternoon heat. Her arm dangled casually over the edge of the jeep's rail, her focus fixed on the lions. James noticed the gesture and opened his mouth to caution her, but before he could speak, everything changed. A sudden, bone-chilling growl erupted from the lioness nearest to their vehicle. In an instant, the animal lunged forward, her powerful jaws clamping down on Linda's arm. The force of the attack yanked Linda violently against the side of the jeep, her head striking the metal with a sickening thud. She slumped forward, unconscious, as James and the other passengers screamed in horror. The lioness pulled Linda halfway out of the jeep, her teeth tearing through flesh and muscle. Blood poured from Linda's shoulder as the lioness tried to drag her farther away. James, panicked but resolute, scrambled out of the vehicle, shouting for help. One of the guides, armed with a large stick, rushed to his side. The lioness growled menacingly, her yellow eyes locked onto her prey, but the guide struck her across the head with the stick. Startled, the lioness released Linda and retreated to the shade of the tree. James climbed back into the jeep and cradled his wife's limp body, his hands shaking as he tried to staunch the bleeding. The guide used what supplies they had to wrap Linda's mangled arm, his movements quick but measured. "We need to leave now," he barked to the driver, who nodded and started the engine. The other jeeps followed closely as they sped back toward the reserve's main station. Linda regained consciousness halfway through the journey, her screams of pain filling the air. James held her tightly, murmuring words of comfort as she writhed in agony. Her arm hung limp at her side, the torn skin and exposed bone a grim sign of the lioness's power. When they reached the station, medics were already waiting. They worked swiftly to stabilize Linda, cleaning her wounds and administering pain relief before loading her into a waiting ambulance. At the hospital in Nairobi, surgeons fought to save Linda's arm. Though they succeeded, the damage was severe. She would face months of physical therapy and live with chronic pain for the rest of her life. The scarring was extensive, a permanent sign of the day a lioness's instincts collided with human vulnerability. The safari company conducted an internal review of the incident. While the guides were commended for their quick response, the company issued stricter safety protocols for future tours, including mandatory briefings on behavior near wildlife. For Linda, the incident became more than a story of survival. It was a lesson in the unpredictability of nature and the fine line between admiration and danger. Back in New York, Linda and James struggled to adjust to their new reality. Linda's legal career, once the center of her identity, was put on hold as she focused on her recovery. She spoke sparingly about the attack, though she admitted that the memory of the lioness's eyes, unflinching, primal, and impossibly fierce, was something she would never forget. Nature has a way of reminding us of its ferocity. For Linda, it came in the form of a lioness, a creature whose beauty belied the danger she posed. It is a lesson that echoes through the savanna. In the wild, survival is never guaranteed. Linda's brush with danger came during a carefully curated safari, where the thrill of the wild seemed just out of reach. For Kato Obanda, there were no cameras, guides, or boundaries. Just the silent darkness of a worksite in a predator that chose its moment with precision. What began as an ordinary evening would end in a fight for survival against the unforgiving wild. Kato Obanda, July 2nd, 1992. The early morning air was crisp in the Kenyan highlands, a brief reprieve from the heat that would settle over the region by midday. Kato Obanda, a construction worker on the Kenya-Uganda Railway, pulled his jacket tighter against the chill as he walked toward a local cafe. It was still dark, the faint glow of dawn just beginning to outline the horizon. Kato's colleagues often joked that he was married to his work, his dedication unmatched even among the most seasoned laborers. This day, however, would test him in ways no one could have foreseen. By 6:30 a.m., Kato had finished his coffee and concluded a brief meeting with a friend. The railway site was a 20-minute drive away, and he arrived to find his team already hard at work. The project was grueling, requiring long hours under the sun, but Kato's cheerful demeanor helped lighten the load for those around him. The rhythm of pickaxes and drills echoed through the area as the crew labored tirelessly, the sounds punctuated by bursts of conversation and laughter. As the day stretched into evening, the workers began packing up their tools. By 10 p.m., most had left, eager for rest after the long day. Kato lingered behind, realizing he had forgotten some equipment he'd left near the worksite the previous night. Despite offers from his colleagues to stay and help, he waved them off, insisting he could handle it on his own. The worksite was eerily quiet under the blanket of night. Kato moved methodically, gathering pickaxes, drills, and other tools. He bent down to retrieve the last piece of equipment when he heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. He froze, his pulse quickening. Slowly, he turned toward the source of the sound. Illuminated by the faint light of his car, a lioness stood less than 10 yards away. Her golden eyes glowed with predatory intensity, her body coiled and ready to strike. Kato's heart pounded as he realized the animal's posture left no room for doubt. This was no passive encounter. Before he could react, the lioness charged. In an instant, her powerful body slammed into him, sending them both tumbling to the ground. Dust rose around them as Kato screamed, his voice raw with fear and pain. The lioness's claws raked across his back, tearing through fabric and flesh, while her teeth sought purchase on his neck. The weight of her body pinned him down, and Kato struggled to breathe under the crushing force. Desperation fueled his movements. With every ounce of strength he had, Kato twisted and writhed, trying to free himself from the lioness's grip. His fingers clawed at the ground, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. Amid the chaos, his hand found a cold, solid object, a metal bar he had dropped earlier. Summoning all his strength, he swung the bar behind him blindly, striking the lioness squarely on the nose. The impact stunned her, and she recoiled with a snarl. Kato seized the moment, crawling toward his car as pain seared through his body. His bloodied hands fumbled with the door handle, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He threw himself into the driver's seat just as the lioness lunged again, her claws scraping against the window as she roared in frustration. Kato slammed the door shut and locked it, his breathing ragged and uneven. The lioness circled the car, her growls rumbling through the still night, but she eventually retreated into the shadows. Kato sat in stunned silence, his back pressed against the seat, every nerve in his body screaming from the ordeal. After what felt like an eternity, he started the engine and sped away, ignoring every traffic sign as he made his way to the nearest hospital. When he arrived, he stumbled into the emergency room, his shirt soaked with blood. Doctors and nurses rushed to his aid, working quickly to clean and stitch the deep lacerations on his back. Though the wounds were severe, they assured him that he had escaped permanent damage by a narrow margin. Kato's wife and colleagues arrived at the hospital soon after, their faces pale with worry. As he recounted the harrowing encounter, his voice trembled, the memory still raw. The lioness's growls, the searing pain of her claws, and the moment he thought he would never see his family again. These images would haunt him for the rest of his life. The railway company took swift action, implementing new safety protocols to prevent future incidents. Workers were prohibited from staying at the site after dark, and foremen were equipped with rifles for emergencies. For Kato, the measures were a small comfort. Though he returned to work a month later, his movements were slower, his body bearing the scars of his brush with death. The lioness vanished into the darkness, leaving no trace of her path. For Kato, she embodied the untamed force of the wild, a vivid reminder of the fragile place of man in a world shaped by nature's relentless power. These stories illuminate the tenuous thread connecting human ambition to the untamed force of the natural world. They speak to our unrelenting drive to test limits, to confront what is wild and extraordinary. Yet they also reveal the undeniable truth that nature operates on its own terms, indifferent to our courage or resolve. In these encounters, we see not only the risks of overstepping the invisible line, but also the profound respect demanded by a world far greater than ourselves. They leave us with a sobering thought. True awe lies not in conquering the untamed, but in understanding our place within it.